Tile palettes can completely streamline the design process of your 2D game. In this video, we'll cover the process of creating a tile in Adobe Illustrator. We'll export those tiles into Unity and create our tile palettes. Then we'll use those tile palettes to create our scene. This video is part of a much larger series where I cover everything you need to know for building your own 2D side view game. The project is available for free through my GitHub account, and you can access that by clicking the link in the description below. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and also check out my Patreon account if you want to donate that way. Also, be sure to follow us on our social media accounts to get updates on the latest videos. Alright, so I'm here in Adobe Illustrator and I just want to go over how I've made the tile palettes. So I have here a project made up of multiple artboards, and each artboard has its own unique look. These artboards are 256 by 256 pixels, so they are perfectly square. And I like creating a tile palette this way because I can easily change the configuration of the artboards while working on them in Adobe Illustrator. When designing tiles, you have to make sure that the edges line up correctly, and we can do that by using rulers. To enable rulers, all you have to do is navigate to View, highlight Rulers, and select the Show Rulers option. You could also use the shortcut Control R. Once the rulers are showing in the window, you can add a ruler by just clicking on the measurement part and dragging down a new ruler into the scene. You can place the rulers to help you guide the connection of your artboards because when we draw our tiles in the game, we want them to all look different but connect in the same location. Once we have all of our tiles drawn, we can export the project by navigating to File, highlighting Export, and selecting Export for all screens. In our export settings, we can combine all of the artboards into a single document, but I prefer to export each artboard individually, so I'll select the Export All. I have found when exporting these artboards to a single file, you do lose a little bit of quality when exporting, as opposed to exporting everything by itself. I have a few different tile palettes all set up. The first tile palette is specifically built for the foreground, and then I have two background layers that I will play around with. Switching over to Unity, I'll open up one of the folders with my individual tiles, and let's start creating our first palette. Now beware, you may have to modify the pixels per unit after importing to make sure that everything fits, but I'll leave the setting as is for now because it brings up a common problem that I can highlight later, and of course how to fix it. Let's open up the tile palette by navigating to Window, highlighting 2D, and selecting the tile palette. Next, I'll create a new tile palette, naming it Palette 1, and I'll choose the location for my palette just by saving it to my local folder. And now we're finally ready to start adding our tiles. You could select all the tiles and drag them in all at once, but because I want a specific order, I will drag these tiles in individually. Once I've done that, I am ready to create my tile map, and the tile map is an object in our scene that manages the tiles that are being shown. To create a tile map, all we have to do is right-click in the hierarchy, navigate to 2D Object, and select Tile Map. That will create two objects in our scene, a grid and a tile map. Each one of these cells are available for holding the artwork of a tile, but before we start painting these tiles, first I'd just like to make the cells of this grid a little bit larger. We can do that by selecting the grid and modifying the cell size variable. I'll bump these up from 1 to 4, and just a quick side note that this is very different than changing the scale of the transform, which would make our output very blurry. So now we're ready to start painting our tiles on the tile map. So first I'll select these 3 tiles by dragging my mouse over the selection. Then I'll move into the scene view, and Unity automatically switches to the paint tool so I can add my tiles to the tile map in the scene. Now you can see that almost everything works, but the tiles are a little bit smaller than they should be, and that goes back to the problem that I mentioned earlier with the pixels per unit. Fortunately for us, that's actually a pretty easy problem to fix, so let's select the sprites themselves that make up the palette and change the pixel per unit from 100 to 64. That setting could be completely different for your project depending on the artwork that you are using, so you might might have to play around with that until you get it right. Make sure to apply those changes to the sprites right away, and you can see that the tiles now fit correctly within the cell. The last thing I want to cover is sorting layers, so we can have multiple tile maps in our game. To control which tile maps appear in front of others, we can use sorting layers. To create a new sorting layer, I'll click the layer drop down and select the create new layer. I'll simply click the plus icon and let's name this layer foreground. Now let's apply the layer by selecting the tile map of our game object in the scene and navigating to the sorting layer drop down and selecting the sorting layer we just created. Now I'll quickly create the other tile palettes and create a few more tile maps to draw onto so that you can see in relatively a short time how nice you can make your scene look. What's up everyone, thanks for watching. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also make sure to follow us on social media to get the latest news updates.